Hello. Today, this morning, or evening, wherever you're listening to us, we are doing Canto 3. And last Thursday, we only got through half of Canto 3, which kind of surprised me, but it was a great discussion. And so, for once, the Thursday group is actually going to be able to see a bit ahead of what's going on in the Divine Comedy through these YouTube. Hey, watch them. All right, here we go. Before we get into the meat of the issue, I wanted just to take a look at this little piece that comes from this website that you can see down at the bottom. And I thought it was neat to talk about this. Of course, we're talking about Purgatory. Also, when I showed it at Thursday group, it was just a couple of days after All Souls Day, which is the memorial of the souls of Purgatory. See by the title, be along with me a bit here. Protestant theologians reconsider Purgatory. This November 2nd, on what is known as All Souls Day, Roman Catholics around the world will be praying for loved ones who have died, for all those who have passed from this life to the next. They'll be joined by Jerry Walls. No problem praying for the dead, Walls said, without hesitation, which is unusual for a United Methodist who attends Anglican Church, teaches Christian philosophy at Houston Baptist University. And I might say, yeah, it's probably true. Most Protestant traditions forcefully rejected Romanish doctrine, Purgatory, the Reformation 500 years ago. Protestant discomfort with Purgatory hasn't eased much since. You still can't find the word in the Bible, per se, and the idea that you can pray anyone who has died in the paradise smacks of salvation by good works. 2, it's still about grace, not works. Critics of Purgatory says it was an invention of medieval Catholicism. In fact, Rome only explicitly defined the doctrine in the 18th century. Dante wrote his Divine Comedy. A few decades later, it was cemented the popular image of Purgatory and hell as infernal. It's certainly true that medieval theology fleshed out the concept of Purgatory. We'll go into details, but certainly can see evidence of belief in something in the Purgatory back in the early church, as early as the 3rd century, at least. So, to say this is a purely an invention of medieval Catholicism isn't quite accurate. And sure enough, Dante, with his mention of Canto on Purgatory, really fleshed it out in an imaginative way. Perhaps some people might take Divine Comedy and Purgatorio as literal fact, not invented fiction to give us some points of how the world and how spirituality worked. Nonetheless, it wasn't just simply evil Catholicism. Sure enough, this next paragraph is true. By the 15th century, Purgatory has been exploited as a money-making scheme by the likes of Johann Tetzel and the German friar, the sale of indulgences, the remission of sins, sparked higher reformers like Martin Luther. Preach only human doctrines who say that as soon as the money clinks in the money chest, the soul flies out of purgatory. And Luther had a right to critique all that. Catholics argue that the earliest Christians prayed for the souls of the dead. Purgatory shouldn't be dismissed simply because it was abused. Rawls agrees. He adds that the time spent in purgatory is not a matter of earning one way heaven, but is an extension of the journey towards holiness. Believers voluntarily cooperate in that process while alive with the aid of grace, and it makes sense they would do so when they die. If you think God takes our freedom seriously, it's unlikely to unilaterally zap us at the moment of death, Paul said. Number 3, purgatory isn't God's torture chamber. For a long time, purgatory was seen as a matter of discipline, a kind of experiment, controlled pain that is so endured before being allowed to pass into paradise. For some number of years, that were often the subject of convoluted calculations about the relative value of mortal and venial sins. Recent years, emphasis has swung to satisfying the justice of God, painful reparations to one of sanctification, or becoming holy. This reworked version of purgatory is something that has intrigued some Protestants. It seems to have won over more than few. To suggest instead that Christians will enjoy a kind of express executive elevator at the time of death suggests that those who work hard in holiness life are wasting their efforts. John G. Stackhouse, Jr., a popular evangelical author at Canada's Regent College, wrote an essay on Wall's idea of Christian century. Sanctification, Stackhouse said, remains a demanding process cannot be short-circuited in this life. Why should we think there are shortcuts in the next? That same issue, Roger Olson, a theologian at Baylor University Seminary, also gave Wall's book a sympathetic. The online magazine Canto last year dedicated an entire issue to the question, which is titled Purgatory, an evangelical doctrine. The upshot was decidedly negative. Certainly, this smells of salvation by works, even if it be coded differently, wrote Matthew Barrett, a Southern Baptist executive editor of Canto. What a shock it would have been to Luther, Calvin, to see evangelicals not only ignoring our differences with Roman Catholics on issues of large justification by faith alone, even going so far as to adopt Roman Catholic doctrine such as purgatory. Paul, however, says that after 5 centuries of Protestant dismissals of purgatory, it will take some time for the discussion really getting going. I think that in the next 10 years, purgatory is going to develop as a serious conversation. And we shall see. Now, it's time to get into Canto 3 of Purgatory, which is situated still 4 gates of Purgatory proper. You're at Antepurgatory, A-N-T-E Purgatory. Here's the gates right here. We're not there yet. We're still hanging around here. But we're going to visit with a lot of folks who are sort of just sitting around because various reasons they make God sit around, wait for them in life. So now, contrapostio, so to speak, is they get to wait up for God to act. Now, those starting Canto 3, those routed souls scattered across the scene, faces once again turned towards the mountain, where reason spurs, justice makes us clean. You may recall at the end of Canto 2, they're having a song fest led by one of Dante's buddies, and Cato appears and says, "What the heck are you guys doing? You're sitting around here where you should be getting sanctified, so go to it." So they all scatter, including Kent and Dante, away from Cato. But I drew ever closer to my guide. How could I run my course without him? Who would have led me up the mountainside? I seemed gnawed by remorse for his offense. Oh, noble conscience, without staying, how sharp the sting a small fault is to your sense. When he had checked that haste that urges men to mar the dignity of every act, my mind, forced in upon itself to have been, broke free, eager to see all before me. I raised my eyes and wondered that mountain that soars highest, heaven, see. Here we see the cartoon version, and they are Virgil and Dante. They're looking up. It's kind of a steep thing here. They have to go through, wondering how they're going to do it. On my back, the sun was a red blaze. Its light fell on the ground before me broken in form which my body blocked its rays. Dante is corporal and he's making shadows. I gave a start of fear and whirled around, seized by the thought I had been abandoned. For I saw one shadow only on the ground. My comfort turned full to me and then to say, why are you still certain? Why do you doubt that I am here to guide you on the way? Vespers are rung already on the tomb, the body in which I used to cast a shadow. It was taken Naples from Lucidium. Now I cast no shadow. Should that fact amaze you more than the heavens which pass the light undimmed from one to the other? You react within these bodies to pain and cold, according to the workings of that will, which does not will all its ways be told. Virgil is first saying, hey, okay, he's saying in summary, hey, I'm dead. Guess what? I mean, I don't have a shadow. I'm a spirit like all these other guys. And then he's going to start talking about trying to understand everything. We continue in verse 34. He's insane, dreams that he may learn by mortal reasoning the boundless orbit, three persons in one substance fill and turn. He's satisfied with the quia of the cause unknown. Could you have seen all, Mary need not have suffered to bear a son. So he's saying, some things you're just not going to know. And if we could know everything rationally, then Mary didn't need to give birth to Jesus. And Jesus would have come to bear our sins. You saw how some yearn endlessly in vain, such as would else surely have their wish, have instead as hunger as their pain. I speak of Aristotle and Plato himself. 4. Three pause, showering and silent, bowed his head, saying, well, Aristotle and Plato would have figured it all out, but didn't, and now they can't because they're in limbo. Pause, souring, and silent because it's one of them. It's on his soul's limbo. Meanwhile, we reached the mountain's foot. There we found so sheer a cliff, limbless legs not have served unless they walked on air. Most forlorn and broken goat trace in the mountains between Quercia and Turbia, paired this would seem a gracious staircase. My guide explained. Now, who is there to say in what direction we may find some slope, up which one without wings may pick his way? While he was standing, head bowed on his shoulders, pondering which direction we might take, I stood there looking up among the borders. Okay, so let's look at some interpretations of these lines. Since it's shortly after dawn in Purgatory, shortly after sunset in Jerusalem, since Italy, Dante's geography, lies midway between Jerusalem and Gibraltar, sometime after 3 p.m. there. This evening begins with the sun's last quarter between 3 and 6 p.m. Now look at line 27. Virgil died on September 21st, 19 BC at Lucidia. Yes, Brindizia, city in Apula that still serves as a port for maritime travelers to and from Greece. Augustus was responsible for the transfer of his body from Brindizia to Naples, or actually Zilio, some 10 miles distant, where it was interred in a grotto, vast tunnel built by the ancient Romans connecting Zilio, road to Naples. John of Servalia records as having visited the site on August 30th, 1413, and having held bones of Virgil in his hand. This passage begins what has been called an antepurgatorial occupation of the body and its burial. Celine Sartusia points out that the four presences, the word corpio, Canto presents the word's greatest frequency in the canto of the poem, is underlying the importance of corporal concern with respect to Virgil, Dante, and Manfred, and a little bit. Now, some comments on it attached to 23. Even now, such little faith. Virgil's words could almost be a quotation of our Lord's words to St. Peter. Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, bid me come to you on the water. He said, come. So Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, came to Jesus. When he saw the wind, he was afraid and began sinking, cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand, caught him, saying, O man of little faith, why did you doubt? It might seem rather harsh to teach a man who's just been walking on water and not believing. Peter's strong enough to begin to walk on the water, but turned his attention to the winds and waves in front. Had Peter not seen enough already for him to trust our Lord would keep him safe? All that he's seen. Now, this is a commentary by Dreyer, the website American Conservative. For me, image of the noble Virgil quietly mourning the tragedy of his permanent exile from heaven is one of the most moving in the entire poem. This is a passage about the limitations of intellectuation. Pilgrim's journey is one from slavery to freedom. It's also one from ignorance to knowledge. The wisest men ever lived do not penetrate the mysteries of existence by reason alone. What hope is there for others to do so? Quia is a scholastic term, expression here means some things you have to take on faith. Virgil indicates that humankind of perfect knowledge did not have needed God to reveal himself to us in Jesus Christ. The important distinction to be made here is what knowledge means. It does not simply mean propositional knowledge, that is, facts about the world. Intellect in classical usage is one entirely capacity to know, including through intuition. Backstory here is the fall damaged humankind's unity with God, therefore capacity to know him, not simply to know about him. In our prelapsarian state, possess unity with him. Unity we lost when our ancestral parents turned from him and tried to stand on their own. In our finitude and brokenness, his infinitude and perfection, we cannot hope to know God in his reality, the fullness of our capacities, without divine assistance, which includes revelation, includes the gift of grace. Without Jesus Christ, the incarnate God, we were lost in the dark woods, as Dante was in the opening of an Inferno. Had he been able to find his way out on his own, he would not have needed a guide sent from heaven, Virgil serving as God's agent. Similarly, the human race would not have needed the second person of the Trinity to incarnate as the Son of Virgin, to reveal to us the way to restore our unity with God, lead the way out the realm of death, everlasting life. Once again, we're going to talk about Virgil's tragedy. This is from Hollander's commentary. Perhaps there is no passage in the poem that more clearly delineates the tragedy of Virgil, now studied by his protagonist himself. His own fourth eclogue, this is one of his poems, spoken of a virgin give birth to a son. It talked about a virgin birth, which is kind of remarkable. And many of the people, particularly the Middle Ages, thought he was something of a, shall we say, a pagan prophet of Jesus' birth. This is no longer a very popular opinion, but still, it's fairly remarkable that he did so. So, anyhow, in this poem, Eclogue, he spoke of a virgin give birth to a son. He did not mean Mary, he did not mean Jesus. That's true. It's symptomatic of how near he came and thus how great was his failure. The result here addressed in an unspoken gesture his lowering of his head, that swells with unshed tears. The last canto, newly arrived pilgrims look up with hope. Word describing Virgil's silence echo key words from that passage that contrast to spirits. Here he lowered his brow, said nothing more, and seemed disturbed. As Benedetto would have it, said, no, Virgil was saying, woe is me, I was among their number. Words and rhyme position, these two terces underline message. Maria Contato, Via Plato, Via Turbato. One way leads up faith, cheap Christian truth, by the mortal woman who gave birth to God in flesh. Other down this potential happiness, rational attempts to know the rationally unknowable, everlasting unhappiness. Mary and Plato are here the very emblems, choices, the human's face. Now here's another commentary from the spiritual direction, Dante. Dealing with mysteries, God's plan for our salvation is one of these mysteries. Our reason will never attain certainty. Only God, three persons in substantial unity, know these things. The rest of us must exercise a sort of intellectual ability, patience, and not knowing. Be satisfied with so it is. Or, as another very literal translation puts it, find yourselves on things of the wheel. This reminds us we can know what God does, but we cannot know why God does it. Because there really is not a why. Well, for everything follows all God has what explanation from you. Where were you? I laid out this clear. Tell me to understand. Who are you to ask for an explanation from nature? Carefully trying to understand, not be understood, so lack of peace. About what we cannot know is trust. There's much we cannot know. Virgil thinks of those impressive minds like Plato and Aristotle, understood so very much, somehow missed out on the promise of heaven because they could not humble their minds before the mysteries that penetrate. Thought of them makes him grow troubled, bow his head, and become silent. They, after all, are the same. Now, we'll talk about one of the characters that Dante is going to meet in this circle of purgatory. This will be Emperor King Manfred. Manfred was a rather dramatic figure. He was the son of, the legitimate son, as it turns out, of Emperor Frederick II. Second was a conflict with the church, the enemy of the church, is even in medieval times, is to be the 13th century. It's considered something of an antichrist. Modern civilization kind of likes him because he seems like akin to modern people. He even did scientific experiments, like feed prisoners different meals and then have them cut open and see what their stomachs look like. He isolated some these are stories, and I think they're true, by the way. He wanted to see what was the natural language of children, so he had a group of children isolated since they were cared for, but no one spoke to them properly. That experiment turned out us too. And there's other experiments supposedly. But anyway, Manfred was his child, and he tried to establish himself in southern Italy uh, around Naples and Sicily. and was a Ghibelline, so I expect. In fact, he financed and helped side opposing Dante's Florence in the Battle of Monteperti, and eventually he died a violent death at the hand of Charles of Anjou, a younger son of French nobility, who established himself in southern Italy after killing him. So he's a violent and kind of reckless man throughout his life. As we see, he will be now in prison. To last minute. Manfred was a prominent figure in kind of Dante. Now, the fact when I think of Manfred, I think of the old Captain Kangaroo show with Mighty Manfred the Wonder Dog. So they remember Mighty Manfred Wonder Dog. This is not who we're talking about. About a someone who was not a dog and he was pretty mighty though. Some people suggested perhaps that last Thursday that maybe he's actually called after this guy. Well, you so. Both were mighty. They both were mighty. All right, here we go. Continuing the canto. And saw upon my left side, beside that cliff face, a throng that moved its feet in our direction, yet seemed not to. So slow was its pace. Master, I said, look up, and you will find some people coming. They solve the problem. If you have not yet solved it in mind. Looked up, and he said, hey, let's go to them. Since they lagged so, you, dear son, believe as you have believed. You are as far off yet from that slow flock. I mean, when you've got 1,000 paces, as a strong slingsman could have thrown a rock. He drew in against the cliff, stood there like men who feared they see coming towards them. Wait for it, huddle close and stare. Oh, well concluded lives! Those souls thus met already among the chosen, she'll say, by that sweet crown of peace that shall be set on each of you in time. Tell us, which way leads to some slope by which we too may climb? Best knows time is most grieved by delay. The sheep come through a gate, by ones, by twos, by threes, and all others trail behind, timidly, nose to the ground. What the first one does, the others do, and if the first one pauses, the others huddle up against his back, silly and mute, not knowing their own causes. Just so, I stood there watching with my guide, first row of that happy flock come on, their looks meek and their movements dignified. When the souls that came first in that flock saw the light broke on the ground to my right, so that my shadow fell on the rock, they halted, inched back as if to shy. And all the others who came after them did as the first did, without knowing why. Let me confirm the thought to leave unspoken. It is a living body you see before me, which the sunlight on the ground is broken. Do not be astonished, and rest assured, does not seek the way to climb its wall out of power from heaven. Thus, my Lord. All right, here's Hollander's thoughts on verse 58 to 60. Having begun their attempt to ascend, Virgil and Dante begin moving leftward out of habit. It's assumed. They will only learn what direction they should be moving in verse 101. Our first glimpse of the souls of Antepurgatory marks them as unexcited, slow-moving attributes will gain in meaning we learn more about them. We got some helpful references to classical discussions of morally charged nature, the directions of human movement, right up ahead are all good, left down, and behind are all bad. See this character. And all I got to say is I'm a left-hander, and I feel kind of left out here. I just don't think it's right to give these sinister attributes to left-handed people. I don't know. I guess I'll just take what's left. Just leave someone else to defend our rights. It's left-handed. Purgatorio is traditionally divided into three areas. Antepurgatory, made up of two main zones, excommunication, late repentance. Later divided into three subdivisions, containing those died and dissolved, those marked by negligence, those who loved the world too much. Purgatorio itself, divided into seven terraces, each of which represents one of the seven capital sins. Earthly paradise, the summit of the mountain. Just like Inferno and Paradise, Purgatory is divided into 10 large parts. Inferno, neutrality, lack of faith, slow, lust, gluttony, avarice, anger, heresy, fraud, treachery, Paradise, and 9 heavens, and period. So we're still, as I reminded you before, we're still into ANTE Purgatory. Underlying the differences between guide and protagonist ways of proceeding, Dante's remark, urging Virgil, look up, intrinsically feels so wrong. It's not the master who is giving instructions to the pupil. Throughout this little scene that follows, one can sense Virgil's efforts to regain his antiquated authority. Virgil does authority as we go on because it's in territory that's not natural to him. Now, here's Manfred, who we're about to meet. This is one of the pictures of Dante and Virgil meeting him. And here we go. Oh, and also I put this little blue background. I'm going to ask, see people in person, they think of this blue background, whether it makes it look better or worse or what have you. So just let me know. Address them, those worthy spirits said, waving the backs of their hands in our direction. First turn around and go straight ahead. One soul said to me, whoever you are, as you move on, look back and ask yourself, if you have ever seen me over there. I studied him with care, my head turned around. Gold blonde he was, and absolutely patrician. On one brow split by a sword wound. I, in all humility, confessed I never before had seen him. He said, look, showed me a great slash above his breast. Smiling added, I am Manfred, grandson of the blessed Emperor Constance. I beg you, return there over the horizon. Go to my sweet daughter, noble mother of the honor of Sicily in Aragon, speak the truth, and speak of it. The flesh had been twice hacked, each wound mortal. Tearfully I yielded up my soul, him whose pardon gladly awaits all. Horrible were my sins. Infinite is the abiding goodness which holds out its open arms all who turn to it. Pastor of Orsinza, by the rage of Clement, sent me down, had first studied the Book of God at its right page. My body's bones still in the ground, there by the bridgehead outside of Benevento, under the heavy guard of a stone mound. Now, rattled by the wind, by a rain drenched, lie outside the kingdom, by Verdi, where it transported them with tapers quenched. No man can be so cursed by priest or pope, but what the eternal love is still returned, while any thread of green leaves on the hook. Those who die Dominus is true, when they repent their feud with the whole church, must wait outside here on the bank, as we do, 30 times as long as they refuse to be obedient. Oh, by good prayers in their behalf, that time may be reduced. All right, let's analyze this story here. Born around 1231, Manfred was the illegitimate son of Emperor Frederick II in Bianca Lancia, and thus the natural grandson of Emperor Henry VI, Constance of Sicily. He was also the father, by his wife Beatrice of Savoy, of Constance, who married King Peter III of Aragon. So thus we get that reference in lines 115, 116 to his daughter of Aragon. When Frederick died in 1250, Manfred was appointed regent of Sicily in the absence of his brother Conrad IV, called elsewhere. Conrad died in 1254, giving a realm to his 3-year-old son Conradian. Manfred again became regent. At the rumors of the child's death in 1258, who would in fact survive another 10 years, Manfred was crowned king of Palermo, in Sicily. That did not sit well with the Pope. Alexander IV excommunicated him in 1258, as did Urban IV in 1261. Urban offered making the forfeit crown to Louis IX of France, who, refusing it, opened the path to the invitation of Charles of Anjou, who accepted. Once Charles was crowned in Rome in 1266, he set out to destroy Manfred, aim he accomplished next month at the Battle of Benevento. Lover of the good life at court, the fervent Ghibelline, man charged, whether correctly or not, with a number of murders to his co-familiars, supposedly undertaken to advance his political. Manfred was not, at least not in wealth eyes, a selection for salvation that could have been calculated to win sympathy for the work that contains him. It is at least reasonable to believe the first damned soul we see in hell is Celestine V, a pope of saintly habits. Here, the first soul we find saved on the mountain to excommunicate Manfred. Whatever else Dante enjoyed doing as he wrote this poem, it clearly delighted shocking his readers, as though the salvation of Cato, which Canto was not incredible enough for it. So that's it. He does some surprises, and contrary to what some people say, that all Dante did was put his enemies in hell, you see Manfred, who was a Ghibelline and opposed to Dante's action, is not saved. And here is a painting of Manfred here, and being killed at the battle at Benevento. This is Charles of Anjou looking at him. Somehow, not only did Manfred get killed, but it seems like he also lost his clothes for this guy. Well, I guess it's not worried about that, being dead. See, here's that wound, actually, that's what Dante was talking about in his painting. Manfred is a wonderful example of extraordinary wildness of God's mercy. He is a son of Emperor Frederick II, continuing his father's power struggle with the church. He was excommunicated and never officially free from the penalties of this state of separation from the church and her sacraments. The sin or Harwood, disgrace, as arms of generous goodness thrown so wide, take me and all those who turn to them. That's what Manfred said in the poem. Manfred did not have time to reconcile himself to the church officially before dying. He did have time. He was mortally injured to his heart. His inability to have the official excommunication lifted, however, does not preclude his salvation. This theme of the limits of salvation being placed by us rather than by God will recur. Human eyes, the soul was lost. God made the salvation of his late soul possible. Manfred wants Dante to tell his daughter he's not in hell, as most people would think the final destination of someone who died as he did. He wants her to know that is in line for entering purgatory so that she can do everything she can to help it. Manfred's communication was very public. He was a public figure. His public disobedience of the church needed to be countered penalties everyone could see. And after his death, the church treated him in a dramatic way. His bones were removed from his grave and scattered on unconsecrated ground, all in a liturgical procession with candles symbolically unlit. He had abandoned the light, trusted him at his baptism. When our parents and godparents received the lit baptismal candle at our baptism, these are the words they heard. This child of yours has been enlightened by Christ. He is to walk always a child of the light. May he keep the flame of faith alive in his heart. Manfred did not. Despite Manfred's excommunication, God finds a way to save him. He is deprived of the sacraments. God isn't limited by the ordinary channels of grace he himself instituted. His working for our salvation reaches beyond official church decrees. The reality of God's generous mercy does not mean that the decrees of church have no effect on us. Anyone who dies repentant, having delayed official reconciliation of the church, must wait 30 times the length of his earthly delay. 3 times, that is, unless one's time is shortened by prayers. Now, remember Manfred's second wound. Manfred's second wound, the poet will insist on the importance of the fact he has 2 visible wounds. Verse 119, perhaps reminiscent of a wound in Christ's side, that's John chapter 19, and also chapter 20. Causes the reader to consider the possible significance of those 2 marks on his body. Perhaps we are to understand the first wound in his brow, traditionally giving Dante the locus of pride, is a sign of his pride brought low, his mark of Cain, as it were, now made good in his gesture of revealing his other wound, his mark of Christ, the seal of his blood. Manfred does not identify himself as his father's son, which is interesting. Frederick II, after all, was condemned to hell for heresy. I'm sure you don't remember, but he was Inferno 10, but by reference to his paternal grandmother, Constance, died in 1198, daughter of Roger II, King of Sicily, wife of Emperor Henry VI, by whom she became mother of Frederick. As Benevento Niccoli, among the early commentators, points out, Dante has borrowed this tactic from Polynesius, who questioned about his lineage by the king of Argos, Caractacus. Anastasius Theobald prefers to omit the name of Oedipus in favor of that of his mother, Jocasta. Corina notes that Dante himself had remembered this scene as convivio, laying the avoidance on Polynesius' part, both his desire to make reference to his own harsh actions against his father, as well as keep concealed Oedipus's evil deeds. On the problems raised for commentators by the salvation of excommunicated Manfred, see this guy, Louis Lefavia, points out that a letter of Pope Innocent III, dating from 1199, fully supports the notion that the excommunicate can be eventually saved. Position, as he demonstrates, that it's not nearly as shocking to Dante's earliest readers as it would become later. Poet's self-awareness is unmistakable. Hardly anyone in his time who consented to the notion that Manfred had been saved. It's not as shocking to us. We don't really remember Manfred, but it's shocking he wrote it. He places this reference to imagined deity those who hear such news by reading Dante's poem in the mouth of his character, and it is our turn to smile. Yet, you can imagine how many Welsh churchmen fumed at this passage, adamant in their vehement, unflagging belief, Manfred damned. Sinners in hell, we must assume, fail exactly to do even in the last moments of their lives Manfred did. While he is held back from purgation for his insubordination that resulted in his excommunication, he too is a late saved soul. Archbishop of Xenia, Calabria, listed by Pope Clement IV, his battles against Manfred's Ghibellines, is responsible to end disinterring his corpse, buried in a cairn of stones piled upon his body by Guelph troops after the battle of Benevento. So this guy had disinterred. Adding insult, entry of disinterment, the Archbishop ordered Manfred's remains cast back into the world. He had first at least been allowed burial in unconsecrated ground, the ceremony prescribed for the excommunicate. Torches quenched, if you recall the poem. So the corpses out of the kingdom of Naples, Sicily, to a bank of the river Verde, they Lyria. You can see just from that how much he was disliked and how and shocking to the initial readers of my comedy had to be that he was okay in heaven. The name of the river Verde, which is green, ever stands intrinsically opposed to such purpose, since it both traditionally represented the virtue of hope, happens to have been the color that Manfred himself favored. Thus, the identical rhyme, Verde Verde, lines a hopeful sign that Manfred's faith, believed, come, and his love longed for. The Church's human agents not understood God's disposition. Final phrase here, for the 30s, caused much difficulty. Barty paraphrases the passage as follows: so long as death does not entirely dry up hope, but leaves a single thread of it free. The spirit of the common Canto overcomes atmospheric tragedy. Might reflect this is the first true narrative of Purgatory. Since neither Canto nor Sala give a sort of perfectly formed autobiographical performance, which we have been accustomed from. First Canto trained us to expect tragedy, tale told the sinner's point of view of death and damnation. Consciously, we may expect exactly this sort of narration here. It surely seems to be similar to the story of death, undignified burial. Yet here, find the tragic surmounted by comic resolution offered by redemption. Thus, Manfred's narrative is set as a pattern for all those we shall hear in Purgatory. We are also reminded in this third canto that our physical remains are at risk at all times. What truly matters is not the marble tombstone on which we are laid, state the soul in time of death. Virgil himself, the pagan guide, acknowledges his final resting place only as a reference point, keeping time, answering Dante the pilgrim's questions. It's not the point of honor or worship. His work in me is. His body is not. Even Manfred, a handsome, pampered lad, who in fact was an excommunicated, power-hungry murderer, realized at the end that his body and his position of power did not matter. Only his relationship with his Lord mattered. He offered himself at the last second to God and is, of course, accepted. When he shows Dante the poet his wounds, is an echo of Jesus showing Thomas the apostle the wounds that he sighed. One of them began, wherever you are, to continue walking, turn to look at me. Think if you ever seen him before. Turn. It's my gaze on him. His blond, handsome, noble aspect. The blow has cleft his eyebrows. But I had courtesy exclaimed, it was receiving. Look here, he said. Showed me a wound high on his breast. Then smiling, I am Manfred, grandson of Empress Constant. Here is a medieval picture of Manfred and Dante and Virgil person. Here's a flock of characters kind of off to the side. Remarkably, the gentle smile he tells his acceptance by God after those two horrendous wounds and disfigured. Goes on to say, even though his bones have been scattered, all that matters is this gradual, slow progress surrendered towards the divine love, fully accepting his last-minute surrender. Google billionaires funding scientific research to prevent death, iron-tried, cross-fit, evidence soaring. It's good to be brought back to earth, so to speak. Be reminded that what matters is not this specific corporal body. The heart and soul should tempt ground houses. And as I've already mentioned, the celebration of Manfred's noble aspect is all the more interesting given that Dante's family fought against Manfred the Ghibellines, led by the exiled Florentine Farinata. We might recall his Infernal 10 fought at the Battle of Monteperti. So it is kind of curious. Now, the ending of this Canto 3. See then how great service you may do to me. You return by telling my good Constance of my condition of this decree that still forbids our entrance to the kingdom. For here, on those beyond, and here is the cartoon version. There's Manfred, here he's being guided by Constance. The issue of excommunication is not the only issue. Manfred says he repented of his terrible sins at the last moment of life. And so his story is also analogous to those of the late repentant whom we shall meet in Purgatory 5, including Bonacontini, a monk of Feltro. There is a nexus of Canting going back to Infernal 27, and Bonaconti's father, Guido de Monteferte, which poses the following question. What constitutes true repentance? What constitutes true conversion? In Infernal 27, we learn that not even papal absolution can absolve one that has not truly repented. Purgatory 3 shows us that if you have not truly repented, not even a papal excommunication can damn you. And they need to go back and read Infernal 27, because this was a guy who Boniface convinced him to come out of retirement. He retired to a Franciscan monastery. He was a conniver and a sneaky guy. Boniface convinced him to go work for him. Anything he did bad, Boniface absolved him in advance. And when he died, St. Francis came for his soul, but the devil said, no, you can't have him. There's no such thing as penance in advance. Well, we're going to meet in Canto 5, just his son did form true repentance. So Dante is inviting us, as this commentator says, to consider what true repentance and true conversion is all about. And I don't think it should shock us as Catholics that we are truly repentant, that papal excommunication can damn you. And I don't think that's really real point of a papal excommunication. It's to try to bring you to your senses and to repentance. So if you do so, then it's actually worked, even if it's not been formally moved. So in Manfred's case, it worked. He's saved. All right, now we're finished with the canto, but I thought we should talk about still another opportunity for you to get artwork based on the Divine Comedy. This is artwork based, you may not believe it, but it sure is, based on his Canto, Canto 3. It's done by Salvador Dali. And you can get something like this. See, it's Salvador Dali, Purgatory Canto 3. It's lot 3, 806. And look, it's only $2,475. No, certainly not much to pay for something from Purgatory. And if you are interested, here's the website, martinlawrence.com.